Hey, everybody. I'm Ramon Mejia from the LitRPG Podcast. I bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and author interviews every single week on our show. And this week, I'm talking to one of your favorite Russian LitRPG authors. He's the author of the Level Up series, co-author to the Knockout series, and has an upcoming new series called Class A Threat, the Disgardium Book #1, which will be out on Amazon in April, but it is out now on litnet.com. Which is a subscription-ish service, a little similar to Patreon. So you can find it there early if you really want to read it. Welcome to the show, Dan Sugralinov.
Hi, everyone.
Good. Yeah, it's close. Okay. So how you doing, Dan?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you, Ramon.
And also, we should mention we also have the third person here, Simon Vale, who is nice enough to do some translation work. You've probably seen him on the show before, if we meet him. But Dan, we're hoping Dan is going to understand us correctly and be able to answer all of our questions. And he seems to be doing pretty good. So I got to say, your English is pretty good. It's much better than my Russian.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start off with some basic questions. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, if that's okay.
I was born in the USSR in one of the 15 Soviet republics, which is called Kazakhstan. And my country is in 9th place in the world by territory, despite no one knows where is it. What about me? I'm 40 years old. I'm married and raising a son. All my life I have been doing business in IT sphere, in web development, until I admitted to myself that I want to be a writer. I have a master's degree in economics and an MBA degree. I have. What about my gaming background? I have an extensive gaming background. I can say I grew up in games, but most of all, I played World of Warcraft more than 10 years, playing for the same character. And, my character is Worgen Rogue from Alliance. For the Alliance, of course, during the Cataclysm add-on, I even became the first in the world by WoW progress. What about my writing background? When I was 24, I wrote a motivational novel titled Bricks. For more than 10 years, this book has more than 3 million reads. And 2 years ago, my mom had a stroke. And sitting near the intensive care unit, not knowing if she would survive or thought about my life. And I decided that life is too short and I never tried to become a writer, really writer. And the next day I started writing Level Up. Restart. This is my story.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that personal information. I read in your on your Amazon page for us, we get a little synopsis of like a description of your background, and your gaming background was really quite impressive. Like you're a champion player in several like gaming categories. So I think there's a very interesting mix that a lot of readers can kind of relate to, and even writers. Your IT background, your background with computer systems and information systems is definitely something a lot of people can kind of connect to. I think a lot of the writers that I've spoken to, the ones that they write as a passion and not just because that's what they were trained to do, like in college or something. They have a gaming background, especially for LitRPG. I think it's very common to have a technology background, whether they're IT or project managers. Like I think Vasily has a project manager. And I know a bunch of programmers and people who deal with databases and programming and all that kind of stuff. I think really helps them to manage like the LitRPG stats of like your levels and and everything. So I think you're one of us and we're one of you. See, we have an international brotherhood of LitRPG.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I can understand you finally. I watched all your podcasts for all last and this week, and I have a feeling like I know you for years.
Yeah, well, thank you. I kind of find that way. I've talked to a lot of LitRPG authors and talked to a lot of fans, and we all have that same passion for the genre. And it's because we're all gamers. We grew up as gaming around the world. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about gaming is that it is such an international concept, and it's an international experience that people in Russia and the United States can be playing the exact same games even at the same times and interact and create this larger community that expands borders. And I think that definitely pulls into our genre of LitRPG that incorporates gaming and RPG mechanics and tabletop games and all the wonderful things, especially the crunchy numbers for me. I'm a big fan of like the number stuff, especially because I'm a math guy, but it's a commonality we have, and we all kind of have the same language. And I generally mean when I say, "Oh, we're a brotherhood of a community," I feel that way, and so I thank you for your common thoughts back.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's jump into some stuff about your series. You have a bunch of series. You have the Level Up series, you have the Knockout series, and you have the Class 8, the Disgardium series. Give me a little bit of a synopsis for each one of those so that people who've never had a chance to read them can get a chance to understand what they are. Let's start with the Level Up series. How would you describe that?
I can describe it by reading, or I can describe it in Russian, and Simon will, I hope, translate it.
Whatever works for you.
Валь, ты готов?
Basically, I had a time in my life when I waited a lot. I was very, very fat. It's 126 kilograms. I'm not sure how much this is in pounds, but I guess it's pretty much. So I got to the gym and I started working out, and I put everything down. I just wrote everything down so I can see my progress. And that's when it struck me with the whole idea. It's just like a video game. I can see my progress written down. So that's the whole idea when Level Up series started. I thought it would be cool to make a series, LitRPG series, with a thing like that, with the interface like that, when a common man just can see his progress written in numbers. That's it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I think someone in the chat room did the math for converting. Because someone says it's 410 pounds in the imperial system. I guess I'm like, oh, that is pretty big. So that gives contextualization to your statements a little bit in for people in the United States. I already have questions for the author from people from the audience. How does it feel to have to wait to see your work translated and to see if it'll be accepted in different countries? That's from someone in the audience.
When the first book hit Amazon, I was even afraid to get to my Amazon page, because I thought that maybe a difference between our people, different mentality will prevent from understanding my idea, my text, my my novel. So basically that was it. But then it was all good.
It was all good. I love that part. It's like, yeah, it's all good. That's a great phrase. So thank you for that. And thank you for answering that question. It's come out from the audience from, his name is Cov0010011. So thank audience member. Tell us a little bit about your other series. We have the Knockout series, which you're a co-author on. How is that for you? And how is that different from the regular Level Up series?
More than 1 year ago, my agent wrote me a letter with he asked me to write a short novel to his new UI and game book, and I just write it about new hero, but in the same conditions like main character of main series. It was a short story about maybe 8,000 words. And you read it, I know, Level Up Fight. And after that, my friend Max Lagno decided to write his own LitRPG book, and but he has a trouble with counting, math, statistics, and so we just consider it to make new just to continue my short story and make a new series. And we called it Knockout. And Mike Hagen is the main character of this series, lives in USA, and our knowledge is about youth life and youth people is from Hollywood movies and TV shows. So this book is very weird, is for me. But I like it because I like my hero and I like martial arts, boxing, and stories about how weak person gets strength and makes action with it.
Oh, thank you very much, and I absolutely agree on all those points. It's definitely a little weird to like read someone else's perspective on American life without them having like lived, like basing all their views or all their like contextualizations of stories based on movies. And I'm like, oh, I recognize that scene from Rocky, or I recognize that scene from something else. I'm like, oh, that's a very interesting interpretation of Hispanic people. I'm like, okay, I guess I see where that's coming from though. If your only reference point is definitely movies, I was like, okay, we're gonna give that a pass. But I definitely recognize that. So it was fun for me.
I'm so sorry, Ramon, for it's stereotypes, you know.
No, it is, and I think it's not something that's relegated to any one country. Like my understanding of Russian culture entirely is based on the exact same thing: movies, television shows, scripts, stereotypes that we hear from our press and our movies and everything. So it's the exact same thing in every single direction. I've never traveled to Russia, so I would have the same issues if I wrote about Russia or any other country that I've never been to or I've had the chance to like live in and explore. But I have to say, like the story Knockout was still very fun. I think it appeals to the same audience because again, this is one of those things about like our growing world, and that we're all very interconnected by media and by video games. You and I have seen the same movies apparently. If I recognize your references that you pulled from there, and so I think that makes us all feel even have a common reference points and languages that help everybody understand everything. So, but I can definitely appreciate your worry about like it connecting with the audience. But I also love the fact that you have the same issues in Russia with your community as we do here, and that not everybody is good with the numbers. And we can help each other out. Like I'm totally into the math stuff. I use Excel sheets galore when I do my writing. But I know other authors who are like, I'm not good with the math. I'm a good storyteller. Can you help me with the math stuff, man? And we all try to help each other out here too.
It's great.
Somehow, Russian authors like to write about America very much. We have several books about America in the Magic Dome books. For example, a book by our founder Alex Bobel. The first book he translated into English was called Memoria, and it was about America. And those few books I've read by English or American authors about Russia, oh my God, does they sound weird, like very weird. And I'm not sure what movies or TV shows you saw about Russia. You said you saw movies or shows about Russia, because of course we do watch shows from America in Russia. Yes, we do that because America provides the most beautiful and greatest shows ever created, and the whole world is watching it. I'm not sure what were you talking about when you said you're watching shows from Russia, but maybe, I don't know.
Yep, definitely. Like I said, I think sometimes the stuff that gets imported or exported internationally is like the best stuff. It's not all the weird little shows that nobody watches or aren't well written. So I think international, like the thing that are purchased across the borders and be international rights are usually like the best things. Like I get to see the best stuff from England, from the BBC. I don't get to see all their weird little shows. Only like the really good stuff that everybody seems to like. So I think it's the same thing, exporting stuff to you guys. But before we miss out on your last book, tell me a little bit about a Class A Threat, the Disgardium series. This one definitely seems different. thematically and game mechanic wise than the other series? How is that so? Tell me something about it.
Disgardium is very different from Level Up. It is my new fantasy LitRPG series, and it was voted the best Russian LitRPG release of 2018. Its English version is already available for pre-order on Amazon, but at this moment, this series is my favorite because I love main character. He's 15 and he's very kind, like Phil from Level Up, but he has a dream and he has a goal. Phil didn't have any goals. He just floating, and Alex, he has. And the setting is my favorite too, because I'm a fan of World of Warcraft and Skyrim and the same games. So I used fantasy elements like orcs, elves, dwarves, magic, of course, undeads, and как сказать отличия? Differences.
A difference? Yes.
Yes, and the main difference of Disgardium is система угроз в игре.
A threat system. Threat system. In-game threat system. So, yes. If the system, in-game system, defines player as a threat, or no, as imbalanced, he is announced as a threat, and the corporation is put a ward for his head.
Yeah, Z is the minimum threat and A is the maximum threat. The A threat can destroy whole world, virtual world. So
Alex receives a god mode. He is invulnerable. He is indestructible to any damage. He can resist any damage. So he can't use this ability, this indestructible ability, because when he puts it on, he's starting to rot. Just like any undead creature, he's starting to rot alive.
И это немедленно его сдаст, да, и клан превентивов, это кланы, которые охотятся на подобных игроков, его сразу смогут определить.
Okay, and the clan of preventives, they can, if he uses this ability, if he starts to rot, this clan can find him,
lost you for a second there. So we had you up until like the clan can find him, and then we lost you. So can you repeat that for me, Simon?
Yes. So they can just put him down if he uses the ability. So it's become easy for them to find him if he uses it.
Right, perfect. And just to let you know, the audience, we're in 3 different locations around the world. In California, Dan's in, I think, on the East Coast, and Simon is somewhere on the other side of the world. So we're at the fact that this is going so well with all the connections, I think that's pretty good so far. We've had a few small hiccups, but thank you for that information. We already have a question from the audience from the Kazakhstan Press LitRPG, which is an interesting YouTube name. They're like, they ask, should I start with Restart or with Class A Threat Series?
It depends on your
preferences.
Preferences, yes. If you like fantasy, if you like антиутопия, как будет?
Dystopia?
Yes. You have to start from Disgardium. Но если ты любишь законченные серии в реальном мире, то тогда Level Up.
Well, but if you like real-life series, real-life world series, and those that are finished, then pick Level Up.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. And of course, all those things you can find on Amazon. I'll pull up a little picture for everybody to see where the stuff is at. So you have all your Hero Up series, you have Knockout series, and the Disgardium series. And of course, he's also been included in some of the short story series for Magic Dome Books as well. So that's all up on the screen if people want to go check it out. But I'll be honest, like your description of the level up of the Disgardium series is a lot different than I thought it was going to be from the cover art. Like from the cover art, looks like it's going to be a YA book, a young adult book, maybe set in high school. And there's no hints there of like all this amazing stuff that you're telling me about, man. I gotta say, the fantasy aspect of it, the overpowered characteristic or the main character, the undead stuff, the clan. It's like, wow, all that is really hidden in that current description and in the cover. I was like, oh, okay, this looks a lot more amazing than that was hinted at before. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading this a lot more now. But still, so many great things from you, Dan. So thanks for telling us about that. Even the Disgardium series won't be out on Amazon until April. It is out now on. It's being again released in pieces by chapter on a website called litnet.com. And we'll have a link in the show notes for you guys who want to watch it and read it there piece by piece as it comes out. And then once the whole thing is out, it should be done by about April, and then it'll be taken off there when it's released on Amazon as a whole thing. So you can watch it now, or you can just wait. Whatever. Either way, support the author, buy his stuff.
Ramon, about the cover, I have fighting with my agent. I think Simon can explain this situation because it is not depend on me. Me.
You mean the cover or the blurb?
Cover.
Well, I'm not sure. Yes, I know the struggling about the cover because, it looks really different from what we usually put up for our books. But I know that Alex has some kind of the idea, and the whole series should be designed in a different way. So he picked this design, and we tried to argue for maybe something different, but he was very insistive on the matter. And one more thing about blurbs. Yes, that's kind of our fault, because blurbs in Russia, they are very different. They don't describe actual content of the book. They are mainly, just put a few sentences trying to convince you to buy the book, and they sound, I don't know, with more, I think, pathos than is really necessary for the book. But yes, there is this kind of problem with Russian blurbs, and we're trying to work with them. And when we try to describe the actual content, it's always better. I know for US market, it is definitely better to describe what's actually in the book. Sorry about that.
I didn't mean to cause any troubles. I was just stating an observation.
Right.
Sorry about that. But I think this actually speaks to something we'll talk about a little bit later, the difference between like self-publishing and like going with like a larger publisher. There are some advantages, and then there are also some
disadvantages.
Loss of control. Like I'm an indie author myself. I publish myself. I just upload it to Amazon, and I set all the things up. But that means I'm responsible for marketing, for cover art, for editing, and all those expenses are things that I pay. If I want to do an audiobook, I got to pay for that as well. And I gotta take the time out of my writing to organize it, to edit it, to like interview all narrators and all that good stuff. And when you go with the publisher, all that's taken care of for you as an author. But at the same time, you don't always get the final say in some things. Like marketing or cover arts or blurbs or, little things like that. Yes, you have less responsibility, but you also have, a slightly less control. It's a trade-off. And so that's definitely highlighted in this particular moment. And we'll talk about, your thoughts on that a little bit later when we get to the writing section, but this is an interesting part as well. So all kinds of fun things coming from the interview. So thanks, guys. Let's see. I think you've also read a different book, though. I read this on your author blurb on the Amazon page. You also wrote another story called Bricks. What is that?
Bricks, yes. This is my first book ever. I wrote it when I was 24. I think this book will never be translated into English. This is a very Russian book. The protagonist goes to work, suffers bullying by superiors, by colleagues, has no friends, and he doesn't even have a girlfriend. And when something happens and he decides that he does not want to live like this and he needs to change his whole life. It's maybe a prototype for level up after 12 years. Yes.
Yeah, I think when you describe, I'm like, man, that sounds like me in my 20s. But I also noticed the similarities between that and Level Up. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like Phil. In the beginning of that story. So I'm like, I definitely see the similarities there. But it's not a LitRPG story. It's just like a straight fiction story, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So it's the non-LitRPG version of Level Up, where it's the same lifestyle choices, same desire to improve yourself, and the same like motivations and paths. It's just no RPG mechanics. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much. We've already talked about your main characters, Phil and Alex. You did a great job on that, by the way, describing the characters and their motivations and what makes them special. So we'll skip that particular question. Are you working on anything else at the moment? I know we have, again, Level Up 3 is coming out pretty soon as part of the translated version. We have the Disgardium series, which will come out in April. That first book's already done. What are you working on now?
I just finished my new series, first book, 99th World.
Okay.
It is very weird story, and my agent still doesn't sure about publishing it in English. I think it has a LitRPG elements like logs and level ups and talents, but it is real RPG. We call it like that, and it is not our world. It is absolutely different world with a different society. I can explain a lot about this story because usually the book you are writing now is your favorite book, but as I said, it is very, very weird. When I sent a plot to my agent, Alex Bobble, he said, no one will read this. But in Russia, I have a lot of friends of these books and this new series, and they asked me not writing Level Up 4, not writing Disgardium 3, and write second book of 99 Worlds.
Yeah, I got to say, there was a fan who wrote in a question for you that asked about that story. When are you going to get that particular book translated into English? I was like, oh, I hadn't heard about that yet. From what you're telling me, it sounds very interesting. I mean, personally, I like weird stories. I really do. I like when they're fun and they make me think and they give me an entirely different world to kind of explore as far as like reading and writing and history of that world and culture. I personally always enjoy real life LitRPG stories. I think we have several in the United States who are authors who also write world stories where it's not set on Earth. They're set in a different entire fantasy or sci-fi world and universe with RPG mechanics. So I can't say that there's no basis for any kind of comparison. But the story sounds interesting to me. And so I personally would like, yeah, I would love to see it. I'm sure you could do a test bed market where you like translate the first couple chapters and just test it on places like the Railroad or Wattpad to see, is there an American audience who's who's interested in this based on just like the first couple chapters and the costs would be not none, but it would be a lot less than translating the entire book. You know what I mean? And you can absolutely test it to see if it resonates with American readers.
Я надеюсь, Леша, услышит эти слова.
Yes, he will. He will. Dan said that he hopes that Alex will hear these words and translate a couple of chapters. And I think that's a pretty good idea, yes, to translate just a couple of chapters, to send them out to all the readers to see if they like the series or not. And I think that weird is good. Weird is good, is always good.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like the difference between Russian LitRPG and American LitRPG is there's similarities, but there's also enough differences that it makes it feel unique and it makes it feel interesting to American readers. And that there's definitely a different cultural point of view. There are definitely different phrase differences in the language that we'll speak sometimes, and it makes it feel fresh and interesting. And I think a lot of American LitRPG, that's what they like about the Russian LitRPG, that it feels different. It feels a little weird to us, so it makes us interested in reading something that's different. So weird is not necessarily bad. But again, I also remember, oh yeah, that's right, you don't publish this yourself, so you can't always make these decisions independently on your own. So I apologize again if I'm not trying to cause trouble with the company or anything. I want to read more from you, I guess I should say, speaking as a fan of your stuff. Now let's talk a little bit about LitRPG. What does LitRPG mean to you?
Oh,
sorry, loaded question. I know.
I can't explain. I think any book where the main character is gaming is LitRPG. Ready Player One, is it LitRPG or it is a game lead? And what is the difference for you?
Okay, so this is a question back to me.
Yes.
Sure, no problem. I think in the United States, there are several LitRPG groups who have different definitions of what LitRPG is, but I think the majority of them have kind of narrowed with things that they like into a couple different sentences. One, that the game world has RPG mechanics, like role-playing game mechanics, where they're like level ups or stat increases or class increases, whatever the case is. We're pulling from a specific kind of video game, RPG games, right? I think those mechanics, whether there's a lot of them there or just a tiny bit, that doesn't matter, as long as the story has those kind of mechanics in there. The second part is that there is RPG progression, in that the main character becomes more powerful in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be like levels or skill increases. It can be something else, but as long as it's still related to that stuff, and none of those mechanics can be hidden away in the story. Like I would say, Ready Player One for me, the book is technically LitRPG because the main character levels in the book, right? He gains levels, he gains several classes. The other characters have different classes, whether they're magic or gunfighting, whatever the case is. But in the movie version would not be LitRPG because there's no RPG mechanics. There's nothing like leveling up. There's nothing like getting classes. All that other stuff is not there. It would be game lit because there are other types of video games there, like where there's shooters or racers or that kind of stuff. But it wouldn't necessarily be, the movie wouldn't be LitRPG for me. And I think you actually chose a really good story example to kind of differentiate the two. So is that an answer from my answer from my point of view?
And I'm absolutely agree with you. Absolutely. Just my very poor vocabulary, I can't explain all my thoughts, and it's very confusing for me. Sorry.
No, it's perfectly fine. I'm excited. I like you said, you listen to a couple of my podcasts and you're like, oh, I absolutely recognize what you're saying. And I think, again, that's the international thing. Like we've all played RPG games and we've all found commonalities of things that we love, whether it's the progression part of it, where your character, whether it's in the novel or in the game, can go from weak and wimpy to super powerful. And that's a big draw for people in real life, because we would all love to be that. We would all love to be more powerful, to have more influence, to be better versions of ourselves. And I think that appeals to people around the world, because a lot of us sometimes feel very powerless. And so to have that opportunity, whether it's in a video game or in a novel version, to see that change and to live in that kind of world is super appealing. I think, and that's that second part of the definition for LitRPG for me, is that there's that mechanic to become powerful, and that's appealing to people. Perfect. Next question. Let's see. What drew you to LitRPG?
Excuse me?
Oh, why did you decide to write in LitRPG?
I love video games. I love RPG games. I love reading. I started reading at 5, and I read several books per week. So the LitRPG is the best way for me to be a writer, because I'm writing about what I know.
Perfect combination.
Yeah, actually, I laugh at that. I laugh because I've said the exact same thing when I talk to other writers and when I describe why I write in this genre. Because I'm also, I'm a huge fan of LitRPG, but I'm also eventually became a writer myself. But that was after reading like 200 or 300 LitRPG novels. I was like, I think I want to give this a try. And I could only write in this genre for the exact same reason. Like, I kind of only know video games. I've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours playing video games and playing RPGs. And so this is kind of the only thing I could probably ever write personally, because this is what I know. This is what I'm drawing from. So that's why I was like, oh, look, with the same thoughts.
It's nice.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's see. Next question. Are there writers that have inspired you to write or write LitRPG?
Inspire?
Yeah, inspire.
Вдохновили.
Какие LitRPG меня вдохновили? Или игры?
Да, какие авторы? Какие авторы LitRPG в тебя вдохновили?
I can just list 3 authors that was my first LitRPG series. Dmitry Rus, Vasily Makhanenko, and Mikhail Atamanov, or Michael Atamanov. How's right?
Hey, I know those guys. I've talked to them, and I've read their stuff. So they're all nice people. Yeah, they're all very good stuff. So yeah, excellent stuff. You mentioned now we're getting into some of the writer questions. So we're moving out from the story stuff. We're talking more about your writing as an individual. So we'll talk about. I think we already asked you. Sort of asked this already, but when did you decide to become a writer, and why do you write?
When I was a kid, I liked to invent stories, to make up stories, tales, and I told for my classmates in kindergarten a lot of my self-made tales. And when I was 12, in Soviet Union was only first 2 books of «Властелин колец» забыл, представляешь?
Lord of the Ring?
Yes.
No.
Lord of the Rings? Yes.
Yes,
That's 2 books. I remember that time.
It was translated only 2 books, and I decided to continue this story. And I wrote my own version of The Return of the King. It was a fun experience. I have 2 readers in my class. My friends was excited for my talent, and they said that I'm much better than Tolkien, because in my story we have now aliens and and dragons and a lot of fun things. And after that I decided to be a writer, but my first book I wrote it only in 24, as I said before.
Okay, perfect. That was great. I love that. I love the Lord of the Rings, that you only had the 2 books translated. I'll just write the 3rd one. What's the big deal? And That sounds amazing. That sounds really fun. I don't know. Consider getting that translated for American audience as a little snippet, like my version of the third book of Lord of the Rings. It might do okay, even as like just for your fans. That would be fun. So perfect. So thank you very much for that information. Let's see. Now we're talking about how do you write? Are you a full-time writer or a part-time writer?
What does it mean?
Oh, part-time means like you have a job, a second job besides writing. Or is writing just your job?
I'm writing only last 2 years. First year I was part-time writer, and now I'm full-time writer. And I can say now, after I signed a contract with Magic Dome, I can only write, and this income is okay for my family.
Hey, that's all we're looking for. I feel the same way. At some point, when I was writing, I was like, can I make a living off this? And I wasn't sure, so I still worked 2 other jobs. So like convince my wife to say, yeah, okay, well, I'll try this full time, and we'll see if I can make more money. And we live off this now, so I understand that feeling entirely, man. So congratulations on being a full-time writer. It's a step a lot of writers will never take. They can't take because they don't make enough money to do this. Even if they have a passion for it, financially they just can't do it. So congratulations on being able to be a full-time writer.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see next. What is your writing schedule like? Do you write 5 days a week? Do you write on a certain schedule? How does that work for you?
Last month was my break. I have been studying English in language school, but all February I was at home, and the schedule was something like this. At 8 a.m. in the morning, I take my son to school and write until the moment when he should be picked up. But January, February, and March will be of this year very saturated, and I will tell you in confidence that at the same time I'm working on 4 projects. And I often make sketches in the evening, and it happens like this. I go to my son's room, we play some game together, something like Far Cry or Resident Evil, but he controls the character, and I just manage to write more than 1,000 words during these 2 or 3 hours. So I'm writing every day, but at the weekend I usually just edit the text and think through the plot from the projects.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That seems like a very balanced schedule of like keeping being productive as a writer, but also making sure that you make time for your family. And that's that. I think that's excellent. So thank you very much for sharing that information. Let's see. Next question. Oh, this one's actually pretty common here. What kind of writer are you? In the United States, there's a whole like spectrum of writers, but we kind of have 2 main kinds. With someone who writes whatever comes out of their brain, they put it on the page. That's called a stream of consciousness writer, or a pantser, because you're writing by the seat of your pants, which is an American phrase. And the other one is an outliner, who has a detailed skeletal outline of everything they're going to do, and they write that first, and then they write the rest of it. Are you one or the other? Or are you kind of both?
I think I'm on my way from first type to second, because the first 2 books, Bricks and Level Up Restart, I wrote without any plan. I started a new chapter, and I didn't know what would be in it. But now, without a plan, I will not even start writing an episode, because I must understand why this scene is needed and what it will change for the characters.
I know that perfectly makes sense. I found myself be the same way as well. Like my first book was very much like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to put words on a page, and the story just comes out the way it comes out. But then when you have to replicate that, when you got to write a book 2, when you got to write a book 3, and you got to plan out for a whole series, it becomes much harder to do that without it feeling like it's wandering, like the story's wandering a lot. So if you want it to be focused, if you want to have like an actual plot or kind of some kind of plan for your characters, I think outlining is really, really useful. Even if you still like make up the details, you can still be creative that way. You don't have to plan out every single word necessarily in advance. You can just have an outline that's loosely telling what your characters are going to do, and you can still have a freedom. So a lot of authors come in with you. So looks like me and you feel the same way. So that's awesome. Okay. Next question. What is the hardest and the easiest thing about writing for you?
The most difficult thing in writing for me, I think it is two things. Make yourself start every day. Just start. And the second is manage to stop. Because when I'm in the stream, I don't notice the time and can't even eat.
Okay, perfect. That makes total sense. I think for me, the first one is probably hard. Like getting myself to start writing, sitting at the computer and starting is probably harder. But I understand what you're saying as far as like once you get going, you don't want to stop. Like you're in the zone. I think we call it here. You're just writing and you're writing, and they're like, oh wait, it's nighttime now. Hey, where'd my kids go? So that can always be the case. So thanks about that. We actually have a comment from the chat room that says from Cinia454. She says, love level up. It's awesome. Just found the Disgardium on LitNet and looking forward to starting it on the weekend. So see, fans in the audience are already chatting in too. So thank you people from the chat room. Let's see. Next question. How long does it take you on average to write a book?
3 to 4 months on average.
Okay, perfect. And then I think it takes another probably three months to translate it. So sometimes it'll be like, if assuming like it goes straight from publishing in Russian to English, it'll be 6 to 7 months maybe. So wow, that's a longer turnaround time. No wonder everyone's always so anxious to get something.
I must notice that the third book of Level Up series, my longest book, миллион знаков в словах. Сколько это, Валь, как ты думаешь?
1 billion of symbols. In words, I don't know. I have no idea. With average number of symbols in one word is, I guess, 5. So we divide 1 million by 5. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. And Ramon is the only one here who's good with math, so he probably should do it.
I can bust out a calculator if you guys really want to, but yeah, that's
I know average book in Russian is 450,000 symbols. So I guess a million, it's twice as much. So I say if an average book is like this, you add another one. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty thick, it's pretty long, and it's all good inside.
Yeah, thanks.
But to be honest, I Level Up, the final trial in English is different from original because I cut a lot of scenes to make it shorter, and I totally rewrite real part of story because it makes sense only for Russians.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the information. I was going to ask you a little bit later about the third book a little bit because I'm like, I have questions that might spoil things, and I'll let you decide if you want to answer them later. But like, I'm super curious about book 3, just because it's definitely more of a departure from the first 2 books in the series. The first 2 books are definitely in the Level Up series, very much real life LitRPG, and that they're focused in the real world, the main characters doing regular things. And the third book looks like it sends them into another world with more fighting, more fantasy, sci-fi stuff, which has to do with like the people who sent him the hardware that gives them the RPD stuff. So it definitely already looks from the cover art to be different and interesting and fun in a good way, hopefully.
Валик,
So the real part is going nowhere, and it's still pretty much real-life LitRPG. And action will take place not only in some kind of other fantasy world, but here in our common world as well. Yep. So if that's what you loved about first two books, don't worry. Plenty of it in book 3 is still happening for you.
Okay, so it's not all set somewhere else. There's still the real life stuff there in book 3 as well. Okay, that'll be a nice, interesting mix. I know every time he dies, things are reset to where his last save point. So I can see how that kind of works out. So again, I'm not trying to spoil anything for readers. I'm just asking questions, folks. Remember, you can always say no that you don't want to answer if you think that's going to spoil the story for anybody. But these are just fan questions. We're going to move on back to the writer questions for a little bit. We have a couple more of those. Do you still have a chance to read? And if so, what are you reading now?
I have been reading since I was 5 years old, as I told you, and I read several books a week. And sometimes I don't remember what I read on last week. But now I'm reading my colleague, Michael Atamanov, Reality Benders Book 4 in Russian. And I'm reading Knockout second book and rereading my Disgardium second book and rereading my new series 99th World, just because after all these reading things you have to reread to make story absolutely good for final reader.
Okay, so I'm jealous then. You're reading stuff that I won't have access to for a little while, unfortunately. So I'm definitely jealous that you're reading them before me. So good for you. Good for you, though. I'm like, okay, that's good.
But you can read Dakota Crowd or something that every day I watch American TV shows in original on Netflix or Hulu, and I'm practicing my listening. And but when I can try to read modern fiction in English, it's some kind of troubles to me, because TV shows use less words, less vocabulary what I can see in the book.
That's an interesting point. I never thought about it the way. Like, to your first point, you're right. I'm getting to read all the American and all the English LitRPG that you don't have a chance to read. So we're even there. But speaking to your comments on it being more challenging to read in English than it is to watch in English, have you ever thought of listening to the audiobooks for the American, the English LitRPG stories? Because they're in sync. So like for Dakota Crowd's books, for example, he has the ebook version and he also has the audiobook version. So you could actually listen and read it at the same time if it's easier for you to hear it and to understand it, rather than like reading at a potentially slower pace. That might be another way for you to consume or get a chance to look at the English LitRPG.
Yes, but I think Dan was speaking about just words complexity. Yes, and I think I know what he's saying, because I'm not sure though about LitRPG, because every LitRPG in English that I read, it was pretty simple with the word choosing. But when, for example, I'm reading Game of Thrones, and they start to describing all those things on a horse, this is a saddle, these are, I don't know what it is, all those parts of the sword, you just open vocabulary on your computer and you just reading and writing at the same time just to know what it is about. This thing could be hard. Yes, could be hard. Show is simpler. I mean, HBO's Game of Thrones, it's much simpler.
Right. And plus you have visual context. You can see what they're doing in addition to what they're saying. So it's a little easier to understand because you don't have to translate your eyeballs. So,
sure.
So I get that. So, okay, just a suggestion, because I know for me, listening to audiobooks is a different experience than reading the text. So a suggestion, that's all it was. Moving on to publishing. So maybe a interesting topic here. There is a big movement in the United States to be an independent publisher, especially in LitRPG. Like I think I would say the majority of LitRPG published in the United States is independently. They don't use a publisher. It's self-published. We essentially will write our story, and whether it's a good or bad story is a separate issue, but you just upload it to Amazon and you put in some cover art, and you fill its information and you set a price point and it's there. And it either does really well or it doesn't based upon, how the readers view it. And that's our self-publishing market here. The publishing market is a little bit different in that you're submitting something to someone else and they have to choose whether or not they like your stuff and whether they're going to invest in publishing it. Between those two markets, why did you decide to go with the publishing side of it?
Actually, I chose both ways. This topic is now being vigorously debated by Russian writers. Since I'm from a new generation, but at the same time I grew up on paper books, I see advantages here and there, and I just include all points in one chain. Usually I'm starting new book on LitNet and have a first income from subscribing by readers. After that I can start selling e-copies of book on different online shops. And after that, I have a signed contract with audiobook publishing companies in Russia, and then my book goes to Magic Dome, and the process continues on their side. And every part of this chain gives me an opportunity to pay bills and to buy new toys for my son, something like that.
Okay, that's a very interesting conceptualization of your process. In that, if I'm going to restate it for you, so make sure I understand it, you first will self-publish it on certain websites and where people can subscribe to you to get the earlier version of it. And then you have contractual obligations, contracts signed with Russian publishers who are publishing in Russia. And then the international rights are with Magic Dome Books, who would take the extra expense of doing cover arts and translations and then publishing it in other languages. And each one of those steps has a different kind of income stream for you, and that you're making different amounts of money from different places all along the process. Is that a good summary?
Yes, absolutely. And I forgot to notice one part of this chain. It is a traditional paper publishers in Russia. Валь, как-нибудь объясни, что эта тема у нас теряет популярность в связи с неуважением к авторам традиционных издателей.
Yes, unfortunately, what Dan says is that paper publishers, traditional publishers in Russia, they are losing slowly, but they can stop it. They are losing their reputation because they are treating authors badly, and there are just two major big publishers. They hold pretty much the majority of the market, like 80%. And that's I'm afraid it led to treating authors pretty badly. So average author can make from one book, average, not a big star, can make like, I don't know, $3, maybe $500 for one book. And as you can see, you can live with this kind of money. And indie authors in Russia can make much more than that. So I think the same process maybe just takes place in the whole world, and indie publishing starts to move traditional publishing a little to the side from the market. Yes, but I must add, as a representative of a publisher, an important thing, because yes, what Dan already told a little bit about it, but let me just broaden this theme. Yes, it's hard if you look at many Russian authors trying to translate and publish their books in English market. You can see that often there are problems, for example, with their translation, because to find a good translator to evaluate the quality of translation of his job, of his work, is very hard, is very difficult. And if you also would like to be sold on different markets, for example, we are trying now Germany, and the first dark herbalist book is doing really great in Germany. If you look at Amazon on this book, it is already 2 months, I think, in Amazon bestsellers in Germany. And it's hard for an author to be an indie, independent author on different markets, because those are very different people, very different communication ways, communication channels. For example, German people, somehow they don't like Facebook. You can find many German people on Facebook. I don't know why, but they using different communication channels. They also tend to buy paper books because they have very high taxes for their digital books. And many authors, all big authors, are published their traditional way with big publishers. Indie is only starting its way over there. Yes. So there are little details, little technical things you must attend to be popular, to be successful on different markets. That's where traditional publishing is very helpful, might be very helpful.
No, and I absolutely agree in terms of international translation work or international publishing. I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I don't know that I would feel comfortable personally trying to find a translator into Russian or to German, because I don't speak those languages, and I can never personally assure myself that the quality of writing is good, and that it makes sense to those native readers and native speakers. And that's one of those things that I think we're absolutely correct in, that a publisher, whether you're small press or you're one of the big three. I think we have the big three in the United States instead of like two major publishers. But those would be the places to go to. But at the same time, those companies are selective about what they do. Like, they have to make certain choices based upon the resources that they have, who they're going to invest in. And for, like I said, independent writers who are just like, I can't get selected by them, or they didn't choose me. There are always the other options of being, I think indie and being able to self-publish works better for them, especially if they're only publishing in their native market, in their native, whether they're German and they want to publish in Germany, American and wants to publish in English, or Russian and Russian. And I think in those instances, indie makes a ton of sense, because it lowers the barrier. Anybody can do it. You don't have to be a perfect writer. As long as people are going to read your stuff and pay for it, that's all that really matters. And yes, there's more responsibility to you as a writer. You got to do your own marketing. You got to pay for your cover art. You got to do your own editing or pay for editors. You can potentially, like I think we mentioned before, you can make more money as an indie author than you can with the publisher. And there's just some benefits and there's some disadvantages, and you got to kind of weigh which one works better for you.
Yeah. I agree. Totally.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on to, because I know you don't do marketing for yourself. So we'll skip the marketing questions and the review questions. We'll go on to just some of the reader questions. We have a couple of those, and that'll be the end of the show, basically. So we have a couple questions from readers, including me. One of the questions is, what are your plans to the Level Up series, and how long will it continue?
I have a plot for Don't Smile, Please, and Don't Laugh for 12 books. But every 3 books, the setting changing. And next month in March, I will start 4th book. But of course, I will write 5th and 6th books. And after that, I don't know will I continue, because it depends on the readers, on audience.
Okay, perfect. That makes perfect sense. I wasn't sure if like the 3rd book was going to be the end, because it seemed like a big shift. So it's good. It's good to know that you have plans for book 4, 5, potentially 6. Even though you haven't started on them, you in your mind you're like, oh, I can write this for much longer than the first 3 books potentially. So good on there. How long do you think the Knockout series is going to
go? 3 or 2 books, not more, because this story is less potential for taking audience attention.
Right, it's definitely more straightforward story than Knockout series. It's very basically, let's fight and we level up, and that's it, right? As opposed to the regular Level Up series, there's social implications. There's the alien subplot. There's his business side. There's romantic interest. That one's definitely, you're right. I think you're right. It has more plot devices and plot points where you could do different things with the storyline.
It's more complex, yes, original.
Okay, let's see. Question from the audience from Pat Drew. These are kind of questions from a reader, by the way. So it says, can you please ask Dan if, 1, he can work to get the English translations out faster?
Oh my God. At this moment, Magic Dome works on 3 my books. Simon, поправь меня, если я не прав. Disgardium сейчас 2 пойдет в работу, и Level Up по 3.
Yes, 3 books. 3 books at the same time.
К тому моменту, когда они выйдут, я напишу еще 3 книги.
Yes, so 3 books, and no, we can't make it faster, because good translation takes time, and you have to be patient, because translation is important. Yes, you want to read a good text that makes sense, good sentence. You want all the Russian spirit being some kind magically translated into Russian English spirit, and it's very hard. So be patient. You'll get there. We'll get there.
There you go, folks. And I think that's totally true. Translation work is almost like you're rewriting the novel and then making changes so that it makes more sense to that culture, because every language has an associated different culture, different cultural norms, different idioms, different phrases that don't always translate well. And so there are definitely some, not just word translations, but cultural translations that have to be made, and it just takes time. So you poking them, it won't make it go faster, guys. So there you go. His second question was, if books 4 and 5 of Level Up will be focused on Phil or a different character, as Dan mentioned, that book 3 will end Phil's adventure in the 21st century, or book 4 and 5 focused on Phil, but in the future, maybe relating to the battle with the other races.
The whole thought, feel one love. I can't answer without any spoilers,
Okay.
Because you didn't read the third book yet.
Yeah, right. Okay, so that's perfectly fine. That's acceptable for me. Sorry, Pat Drew, who asked the question. Spoilers, that's your answer. He can't answer without spoiling things. But it's good to know that he does have plans for book 4, 5, and potentially 6 in this series, though. I'm definitely happy about that. And the last question from Dan was, from Pat was, is Dan planning on an English translation of Bricks 2 and the new 99 World Series? And I think you kind of mentioned the answers to that in that you're not really sure. You don't think Bricks is going to translate, but you kind of iffy about the 99 World Series. You have to, right now it's a no, but potentially in the future, if you test the market, it might be yes.
I think it was very good advice from you, Ramon, about testing chapters, and maybe if you like it and someone from our American audience likes it, Magic Dome will translate it. I hope.
Right, because it's expensive to translate, 300 or 400 pages of text. It's less expensive to do 20 or 30. And if you can potentially say, hey, here you go, guys, we can test this out before we invest in the larger project. I don't think that's a bad idea. So I think that's where it might end up going, but that's me speculating. I don't want to cause problems with Magic Dome Books. We have a Magic representative here who's nice enough to do the translation for us here, Simon. And I don't want to get him into trouble in making him say anything about commitments or questions. So we'll leave that alone. And those are all the questions from the audience. I'll give a second to anybody in the audience who's watching live. If you guys want to ask any more questions, feel free to do so. And we'll ask them to our friend Dan here. But I don't seem to be saying anything, so I think that's going to be kind of it. Was there anything else you wanted to add about any of your works or any of your projects or anything you want to say before we end the podcast?
No.
Nope. Okay. No, there you go. Simple answer. So thanks very much, Dan, for talking to us, for talking to me, and for us. I think this was the only interview I've ever seen for you anywhere in English, at least. I've seen your picture plenty of places. I see you on Facebook. I see you commenting on different comments and threads and questions and stuff. But I think it's super fun for fans to be able to actually see their favorite authors, to hear their voices and to hear their comments and opinions, and to get to know them. It makes them feel more connected to the people, to the works that they really enjoy and love. So thank you so much, man, for taking the time to talk to us. And again, we'll have the links in the show notes for your website, for your Facebook page that you want to show off, to the author page, all the stuff where you can buy stuff on Amazon and on lit.net.com if you want to get that early look at Disgardium. We'll have all the things for you guys who are watching and listening. So thanks, everybody. If you want to say goodbye to everybody, Dan and Simon.
Goodbye. Thank you for your attention. And Ramon, big thanks for you, because you know how I was nervous, and you might feel free, and it's amazing, awesome.
Oh, thank you, man. That's very nice of you. And Simon, thanks for hanging out. If you want to say goodbye, Simon, to everybody.
Sure. Of course. I want also to say thank you, because as always, you're doing an amazing job, breaking the ice and helping us with all the summaries of our messed up answers. It was a great job, as always. Thank you. And thank you guys watching this podcast, reading the books, reading Magic Dome books, and other LitRPG books. Thank you. And I'll see you.
Oh, sorry, Ramon.
Sure.
Oh, I forgot about my co-author for MacLeod. His new book, Adam Online, will be released in March. Yes.
Yep, absolutely in March. He has the big robot cover on the cover art. I mentioned it every single week in the podcast. I'm like, oh no, Max is here, and then there's Dan over here, and then here's Dan again.
Next week I will write a post on Facebook and LitRPG Books group about his book. I hope you'll read it. Thank you.
Definitely appreciate the mention and the shout out to your friend. That's very nice of you, I got to say. So thanks to everybody for listening, for watching the LitRPG podcast. Or until we can hang on again, ladies and gentlemen, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.